and introduce to you Virginia Kuhn. Virginia Kuhn is a professor of cinema in the Division of Media Arts practice at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Her work centers on visual and digital rhetoric, feminist theory, and algorithmic research methods. Her current projects are Snowflake, a collaborative design environment for transmedia workflows using machine learning. And the second one is the Sacred Pose, on which she will have a speech today. Her books include Future Texts, Subversive Performance and Feminist Bodies, 2016, and Shaping the Digital Dissertation, Knowledge Production in the Arts and Humanities, published in 2021. This book on digital-born dissertations recalls an experiment did by Virginia in 2005 when she successfully defended one of the first-born digital dissertations in the United States, challenging the ethics of representation as well as archiving and copyright conventions. This book is one of the achievements of Virginia in her commitment to helping shape open source tools for scholarship. She has been awarded from various important institutions, and she was the 2009 recipient of the University of Southern California Award for Teaching Technology. Virginia directs now the undergraduate honors of multimedia scholarship program, as well as the graduate certificate in digital media and culture. And in her classes, I can testify to this because I was there. She is really excellent in marrying theory and practice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you, Mia, Giulia, and Enzo for inviting me. And I'm very privileged to follow Lev Manovich, whose work has influenced my own for many, many years. So I'm going to start a timer here, because I also have a hard time reading when I'm trying to go forward. So my work on augmented images, I should just say my work is very much project-based, and so it's iterative and it's done in teams. So I just want to acknowledge that every project I talk about, it's not just me, and I will try and name my collaborators or at least show them. My work is very much influenced lately by a theory of lettered orality, which I'll explain in just one moment, and that kind of governs the way that I do all of the projects. And lettered orality, which I'll get to in a moment, is a way of epistemology, is a way of knowing that moves beyond the just narrow academic confines of, thesis-driven prose and kind of sources. It allows us to integrate many sources, some of which we've forgotten over the years. And allows a diversity of sources. So I borrow widely from many sources. As a rhetorician, we think that everything is our province to examine. And then I just, particularly since the pandemic, I've been very much interested in embodiment. I think that the move online has just left us all, it's very easy to elide considerations of the body and of race and class and gender. So I'm really interested in bringing that back. So my work for many, many years has been influenced by Walter Ong's work in 1982, his kind of seminal book, Orality and Literacy, the Technologizing of the Word. In fact, one of my dissertation chapters was the technologizing of the image. But in this text, Ong traces the move from oral culture to literate culture, and then into contemporary culture. Of course, this is 1982, which he calls residual or secondary orality. I update this and consider lettered orality. Part of Ong's point is that writing changes consciousness, which I very much believe. But rather than thinking of the current moment as residual in some way, I think we're never going to forget that we're print literate. So we have that kind of mentality of literacy, but currently we can integrate sources that are part part of oral culture and orality. So we can combine techniques of both. The affective can be considered along with the typical academic objective. And we can encapsulate the types of sort of associational, empathic, and subordinative ways of knowing that, these have typically been contributed to women's ways of knowing or people, non-Western peoples. So I'm hoping too that this lettered orality, it kind of resists this narrative of progress, that if we're just patient, things will get better and we'll have more social equity. So I hope that this is the overview of my thinking when I choose my projects and the way that I conduct them. So today I'm going to talk about three projects briefly. The first is video analytics Tableau, which attempts to archive massive film archives to index them and kind of computer generate reading them. I'm very indebted to Lev Manovich on this point. The second is Project Snowflake, as Maria mentioned. It's a Google-funded project that is attempting to, originally the intent was to place the research workflows that Hollywood studios have been able to do with all of their millions of dollars and put those workflows into the hands of independent media makers. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll end with this Sacred Poses project, which I'm really excited about. I just was awarded this grant, so I'm only a little bit into it. So at first is this, the VAT. It's the Video Analysis Tableau. This is a project that I undertook 10 years ago with supercomputing scientists across the country, some of whom were always at San Diego Supercomputing Center when Lev used to be there in his part of the woods. We're, the video archives, we have massive archives available, but they are, notoriously very poorly tagged. Their metadata is inconsistent. And so we're attempting to get away from language and just analyze images by images. So I'm going to just show a visualization done by my colleague Dave Bach of what we're thinking about when we were doing this. So we're trying to do a spatial representation of time-based media. So you can see this old, we take something out of copyright and we, look at film and cut it up into frames and then analyze those frames. I mean, I'd like to move beyond that sort of analysis, but for now, this was some of the early experiments we did. So you can see that now we'll segment it and cut it up and sort of place them together, and we get this kind of odd look to the images that we'll see in a moment. If you play it this way, this would be the standard way of playing the film, and then we'll come back in a moment. I tried to speed this up, but I couldn't, so we'll just take a moment and think through it. This is it on the sideways plane, and then it's really interesting when you see enough of these, you can start recognizing things that you hadn't seen before. Now we go from the top down and see what that, where that gets us. And then the last thing we did was we took a slice right from the center of the frame. A little slow. And we get these kind of barcodes that are really quite interesting, and then we could compare these barcodes to other barcodes. Our next, you can see we're taking just the center of the frame there and going through and seeing what the results are. Pre-pandemic, the next thing to do was to take a slice on the diagonal, so we can get, the rule of thirds, you get more in the frame in some parts of the frame, so really taking it down the middle proved pretty limiting. But then the pandemic hit, and I also had a life moment. So we have we're on pause with this project for the moment. I'm just going to go ahead and advance out of that. I did this so you could tell when I'm not going to bore you too much. So we've talked about that first project. The second one, this is Project Snowflake. It's these new lookbooks for generating independent media. So the URL here is snowflake.usc.edu. I can't get to it online because I'm having a bit of an issue getting online. But it is a collaborative design environment for transmedia workflows. We just shot a design fiction video for this project in an effort to get input from our user community. That is on the website. It's not something I can show you. We shot the whole thing in virtual reality, it's a very, very kind of rough experiment. You know, I have background images. You know, we have the actors there in VR headsets, all in the same room, you know, acting in this space. It's quite interesting. This is the project team. I owe a lot to the team. There are many of us for this. And I'll just show a sketch of what we had started, or what our thinking was. So our notion is you walk into this environment, you can start playing with images for your lookbook, then you have this snowflake helper, we call him Flaky, which is very annoying. But Flaky then comes and generates more images based on the images that you've generated, using different types of computer vision. And then you can choose them, bring them into this workspace, and bring them in actually 3D, and actually have your pre-visualization for your film. So that's Project Snowflake. Again, you know, you talk about Google and their various bits. This is a Google-funded project, and yet we had a really hard time getting Google to release their, you know, TNI, their reverse image search engine. But we were able to integrate some GAN images, as Lev was talking about, these generative adversarial networks. And some work done at the MIT Media Lab on this. I don't have results from our own entry into the GAN images, but those are very much part of this Snowflake workflow. I don't have good results from ours yet because this is still very much in production. But the MIT Media Lab did a major experiment with generating GAN images for communities to help plan their futures. And you know, they put in the images that they thought they wanted, and when the computer generated things, particularly when the results were new and unexpected, those seemed to be the most you know, provocative and the most worthy of kind of bringing, sparking new imagination. And they suggest here that the difference between the participants' imagined output and that generated image is what actually facilitated the new insights for the participants. And again, hoping that we can use these generative models to kind of create a better future. That is always my concern too, the impact on everyday reality and people's lives in the material world. And I also, going from this is someone I follow, this is a quantum mechanics researcher, Amit Goswami, who is widely considered, you know, one of the, you know, his textbook on quantum mechanics is taught in universities all over. But he has, he suggests that the immaterial begets the material. So we have to think it before we can actuate it. And so I think that's what's so interesting and important about these new images and these new insights that we can glean from them. My work is always trying to put the human back in the computer. So that's a little bit about that. Then finally, I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this sacred poses project. So, as I said, particularly since the pandemic, when everyone was online, it had made us kind of attuned to the fact that we are only our minds. We are not our bodies, we're not embodied. We kind of forgot about our bodies. in many ways, as we all sat in front of the computer, kind of constricted. And I'm actually invoking A.B. Warburg, too, who was very instrumental in my own thinking about trying to create a language of images and get away from the actual words and just have images stand in. So I refer to Warburg's notion that these postures and the gestures in, well, contemporary for his time art, they extend, artists aren't borrowing from other artists, from classical artists, rather they're these universal gestures that one takes on. And I share that kind of cultural criticism, like suspicion of the universal, because the universal too often has been kind of used for bad purposes. But I do think there's something to this, and so I think, as a good friend and colleague of mine who's a really talented animation filmmaker says, you have to go deeply into the personal in order to access the universal. So for me, this is very, very personal. I had a bout with breast cancer in 2019, and I used a lot of Western medicine, but also it was ancient wisdom that actually cured me in many ways and shapes and forms. I had a horrible issue with an arm that all the Western medicine wanted to do maybe even surgery on, but I found after a yoga retreat with 4 hours of yoga a day, I was able to get rid of this problem that never came back and that I had had for 9 months. So there's very personal for me, and I started thinking about these ancient movement traditions and what kind of wisdom was there that we have just forgotten. So I proposed to use motion capture to, and this is what we're currently doing, to look at yogic sun salutations, to look at Muslim prayer, and to look at Tai Chi. And these are the three kind of movement traditions, as you can see. Tai Chi, we're going to look at, we have advisors from across many divisions, from the dance school, from kinetics, from the medical school, and we have an advisor for each of the movement traditions. And so even though these traditions aren't pure, they have been, contemporized in some ways. We're looking at the research and the histories of them. We're using the Yang style of Tai Chi. We're using some particular sun salutations. And then we're still not sure on the exact which sequence of the Muslim prayers we're going to use. But then we're going to use motion capture. This is actually myself on the motion capture stage in an early experiment, because we finally got the stage and then we couldn't employ the dancer because it was finals and you can't have students working. So I suited up and did it myself. And then this is my Selwa Swiden, who is my doctoral student who is working with me as well. This is actually what the motion capture stage looks like and does. So there's 30 cameras that are taking images all at once, and you can see the movement there in the middle. You wind up generating, this kind of algorithm avatar, and then you can add to it and put the dressing and the body on it. So we have a computer scientist who is an expert in haptics, and we're just trying to create the algorithm that we're going to use to do the comparison. We're also making use, hopefully, of Open Pose AI, which I know Maria is using as well, which is helping to kind of isolate or look through what these poses are and how to do the comparisons. This is actually a really, really tricky problem. Our research questions are, do these activate the same muscle groups? Are they meant to be good for the body as well as good for the mind? And we understand the potential ramifications of disconnecting the conceptual or the sacred portion of it and only focusing on the material, but we think it's very, very important to focus on just what the body is doing and then to link that up with the spiritual practice. and see the ways in which those things can achieve the same goals. I think the other issue is that a lot of times these comparisons are tricky on motion capture. It seems to be this kind of neutral taking of the body, and yet, having done it myself, there are the operators were telling me, like, I have different, my knee shifts a little bit to the left. I mean, bodies are just very different. So for our purposes, we are employing a single dancer to learn the three traditions and then to perform them. So we're hoping with that our results will be just based on the actual movement and not on any particularity of the person doing the movements. And I realized I kind of talked quickly through that. So I don't have too much more to say about this. I was hoping for a long and good discussion. I mean, I could talk for 30 minutes about each of these projects, but I wanted to be a little bit aware of that. So I think I'm just going to, I know that was a very brief overview, but I wanted to just suggest that for so many AI researchers for so long have said that, you know, we thought we could teach computers to think like humans, and then we had the struggle, so we started really just teaching humans to think like computers so they could generate the algorithms. And now we might be somewhere in the middle, I think. I think with GPT-6 and with these new, yeah.
So I thought 6 already?
No, I know. I misspoke. 3.
Okay.
I want to double it right away. I want to expand. With that and with GAN images and things, we might be in that kind of tipping point where we actually are teaching computers to think more like humans, and maybe vice versa. As Lev was saying, you know, we humans, we have our habitual patterns, which are really, really difficult to break. And so I think sometimes our tools can exceed our own imagination, and particularly if they're iterative and we can take them back into account for the next version of something. And to that end, this image that I opened with is a really, if you can see it pretty well, it's an impossible image. It can't, and it is not photoshopped, not touched up in any way. This post is very, very far away. It's actually very close here. And I took this image, it's been just an image that is my current kind of thinking image. I took this image after a weekend of meditation in the desert with a shaman, and I still don't know how I got the image. You know, it's just, I've tried to replicate it so many times. And it's not that the camera is, you know, the camera is something we've created, so it's not that it's an unmediated image, but it's still an image that it would be impossible to get for just a typical everyday single view. So with that, I want to just say thank you very much and maybe open it up for any conversation that we might have. Sorry.